morning, everyone. I'm Steve Young, Program Director at the Poetry Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. First off, I want to thank Commissioner Andrea Telly and Craig Davis and all the fine people at Chicago Public Library. It's an honor to be back here for another Poetry Day. And gratitude to you all for coming out. What is Poetry Day, you might wonder? Or isn't every day Poetry Day? Of course, but technically it's the birthday of Poetry Magazine, established 170 years ago this month by Harriet Monroe, right here in Chicago. As a matter of fact, in preparing to launch her new periodical, Harriet logged many hours in the Central Library at Michigan and Randolph, reading, as she put it, not only recent books by the better poets, but all the verse in American and English magazines of the previous 5 years. Her research led to her Poets Circular, which served as both solicitation and notice to poets of a new chance to be heard in their own place. This magazine, she wrote, will appeal to, and it may be hoped will develop, a public primarily interested in poetry as an art, as the highest, most complete human expression of truth and beauty. Harriet's hope still guides us today. This year, Poetry Day marks another milestone, the 30th anniversary of the Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowships. Like Poetry Magazine, the Lilly Rosenberg program has established a remarkable record of identifying and rewarding gifted young poets. Among recent recipients are Erica L. Sanchez, Sam Sachs, Jamila Woods, Ocean Vuong, and Inez Smith, to name just a few. For the past few years, the Poetry Foundation has created opportunities for the fellows to share the stage as a group. Tonight represents the inaugural reading of the new class, and to introduce them, please join me in welcoming the editor of Poetry Magazine and the person who reviewed thousands of fellowship applications, my great colleague, Don Scher.
Thank you. The Lilly Rosenberg Fellowship Program recognizes poets who are already creating wonderful work and exists in order to encourage them to further their craft. So it's a pleasure to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the program tonight with this new outstanding group. Educators, organizers, editors, much more besides, all of these poets are as committed to making room for other poets as they are to their own writing. The 5 winners selected this year were chosen from 1,573 submissions, and yes, I read them. So what I'll do now is introduce them in order of their appearance, reverse alphabetical, so that's fair. With the exception of Jose Olivares, who couldn't be with us tonight, but I'll say a few words about him as well. Michael Wasson is the editor of Self-Portrait with Smeared Centuries, This American Ghost, and a brand new book, Swallowed Light, that's just been picked up by Copper Canyon Press. He's the recipient of a Native Arts and Cultures Foundation National Artist Fellowship in Literature, the Adrienne Rich Award for Poetry, the Vinyl 45 Chapbook Prize, and Joyce Carol Oates Commencement Award in Poetry. He is an Nimipu from the Nez Perce Reservation in Idaho. Poet and essayist Justin Philip Reed is the author of Indecency. You might have heard of this book because it was the winner of the 2018 National Book Award in Poetry, winner of the 2019 Lambda Literary Award in Gay Poetry, and a finalist for the 2019 Kate Tufts Discovery Award. His second full-length collection of poetry, The Malevolent Volume, will be released next year. He's a 2019-2021 Fellow in Creative Writing at the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics, and he's received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Conversation Literary Festival, and the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis, and he was born and raised in South Carolina, which makes me happy because I'm from Tennessee, which is down the road a bit. Jane Huffman grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan, and she earned a BA from Kalamazoo College and an MFA in poetry from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. Her poems have appeared in Poetry, The New Yorker, Field, Iowa Review, and elsewhere, and she's the editor-in-chief of Guest House and teaches at the University of Iowa. Franny Choi is the author of Soft Science and Floating, Brilliant, Gone, as well as a chapbook, Death by Sex Machine. She earned a BA at Brown and an MFA at the University of Michigan's Helen Zell Writers Program, where she won Hopwood Awards in Poetry and Drama, like Frank O'Hara did. She's received Poetry Magazine's Frederick Bach Prize, as well as fellowships from Kundiman, Vona, and the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. She's a Gaius Charles Bolden Fellow at Williams College, a member of the legendary Dark Noise Collective, and best of all, in a long portfolio, co-host with Danez Smith of the Poetry Foundation podcast Versus. You must listen, you must. And finally, as I said, he can't be with us here this evening, but let me tell you about Jose Olivares, the son of Mexican immigrants, the author of Citizen Illegal, co-author of Home Court, and co-host of the poetry podcast, The Poetry Gods. He earned a BA from Harvard University, and he's a recipient of fellowships from Cantamundo, Poets House, Bronx Council of the Arts, and the Conversation Literary Festival. In 2018, he was awarded the first annual Author and Artist in Justice Award from the Phillips Brooks House Association, and he was named a debut poet of 2018 by Poets and Writers magazine. But he's also co-editor of Breakbeat Poets 4. Some of you know the other 3 Breakbeat Poets books. This one will be called Latinxed, and it will be coming out next year and featured, as all the other volumes have been, in a portfolio in Poetry Magazine. Let me just finish up all those introductions by saying you'll be able to read a portfolio of poems by these fine poets, all 5, in our December issue. So with that all behind us, now there's just poetry to go, and we'll start with Michael. And just again, a welcome to all of you here, and a special welcome to these wonderful poets.
Hello. You have to think about this. I came in here from Japan, so my mind's a little bit cloudy right now. So everybody's kind of a little bit blurry, but so is that feedback. But first of all, I'd like to say, Tatskalawat oikalo, inwet nakis tapmapza ilchaichaich, atskait ko Michael Watson. Himakas katsiao e oikalo. Untoni, kunku wach kunku, himakas, tipnapa. I'm from Idaho. I'm from the sticks. I come from a small town of about 600 people, so I'm very glad to be before everybody here. Thank you for coming out. I live abroad, and sometimes there are times when you have to help yourself kind of survive every day, whether that's through language or through different tasks you have to figure out. But I'm going to read this one for you. This will be my last one. Your shadow invents you every time light fails to pass through you. Some days you wake to the sound of smoke pouring through the keyhole in the room. Open your eyes. This is only a test. The bluing of your hands can be anything you want. The bruised dawn, like a river rising to your windowsill. A purple, forgetting how blood leaves the body in ruin. A forsaken lip, smeared in thirst, resting on your lip, as though your skin could salvage the dream of being so touched. Listen, I know you're afraid. I am too. I know how the body prays for beauty, but remains a shipwreck you are building in my image. How many books are enough to tell you you're alive today? How many days end up all dark, and the monsters of your childhood appear like saints erased of their mouths? How the mouth cradles a tongue carved by years in exile until it's ready to shape a word like a parting hand full of promised wildflowers. Happy Mother's Day. This is you at the edge of a paradise, growing back after being scorched from the face of earth. This is us, afraid of the men who fail to kiss us goodnight and step through the walls. Some days you are living a nightmare. Some days a miracle as wide as a spared life. Listen to me. There will be a day when the world will need you most. Be alive on that day. I vow your father is as American as the bones your mother grew inside you. The gunshot in your head is only a shadow puppet, a slow explosion of a field of clematis in early June's bloom. Look at all the colors, like little gods on fire, hurtling in and out of each other's lives, out of each other's terrified skies. Are you still alone in bed? Is it morning yet where you are? The smoke turns to rain as usual. Listen, my love. This year is just a visitor and next year's ghost. Take care of it because, yes, you do deserve flowers for once in your life. You will be the only one left, so hold my hand and call me tomorrow. We are all here. It's okay. It's okay to be this afraid. I am you. Can you feel that? Yes. That is the whole world outside, moving without us. But listen to me. Listen. Here's the light, an arm's length away. The ceiling reforming above you, like another heaven after its own self-destruction. Here's my body and you, stretching lifelong toward every hole in the house, left as warm as a father running from horizon to horizon. Don't be afraid. Touch me here, where some days it hurts. Get up, get dressed, open the door. Thank you.
I feel absurd and messy to follow you, Michael. Happy birthday, poetry. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to everyone who made this event possible. And it's a real pleasure to be here with such talent. The first poem that I'm going to read is a response to a problematic fave of a lot of poets, Sylvia Plath. She has this poem in the beloved Ariel collection titled The Jailer, in which she writes, "He has been burning me with cigarettes, pretending I am a negress with pink paws. I am myself. Is that not enough?" Of someone else entirely. "You have been burning the cork of yourself. You crawl the night boards, bare ass scratching negress against the grains, leaving fingernails in invocation, dabbler out your damn mind, summoning a phantom, the shape of my granny, that peerless apparition, her halo of witch hazel and snuff, her knuckles cracking the whip kept tucked away in her attic like a hush of bastard fist. You slip her on, hot to be hazed, dressed in a distinct leather stink. The gaze of a husband who hates you less bears down her living midriff, sniffs her out as he would a bloom of mold in your basement, its dank souvenir. What blood ensues is the pink in my palms and patter of rebel in my neck when I, having slept wild again, awake. About impossibility. I am not unsympathetic. I get it. He beasts you and you feel a need to pass the buck. In my house, we call this nothing much after all. When Freud observed Verschiebung, he wasn't looking at us, how we assault the air with grudges, avoiding talk of our learned tortures. I will not flash you the rattling quarters of evening, my mother's crowd inside to seek their penny-wide retreats. I'm going to unfatten your pockets. Remind me again of your ghost ration. What if you could eat your fill? Have you? Haven't you had enough? What would you do without us? In the poem I'd conjure to carry me across the finale of my animal life, I can ride no skin but this one. Sweat stifles its cells till they fungify. The night choir sways down my throat's red aisle, my muscles flaccid in felt ventriloquism. The vessels sing a sequence of chains. They chew through my confessional face. My mouth lopsided as a fainting chaise. My mouth clicks back to work. My teeth latch bolt into a snigger. Tight, bright, luxe. Enough. Sighs the blue smoke, the grin cuts out of the bottom lip. Enough. Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota is a pretty famous poem by the poet James Wright that he wrote on retreat with Robert Bly, who was fixing up the Duffy farm. The poem itself is a pretty simple collection of images, and down at the final line, Wright famously writes, "I have wasted my life." This was kind of posed to us in undergrad as quite a revelation, and I later began to think how much of a revelation is that for this white man in academia who could afford to be on retreat to write this beautiful poem. So I thought, what if I also get to waste my life? I have wasted my life. There it goes, thin thing, Cheshiring between trees whose reaper robes trail their trains deep underground. Your life hanging out like an exposure. Easy now, it's your posture I followed here, summerful hump of it, Sunday spoil, as if anything could happen in this moment to anyone else. Your life is that horror scene in which the girl is roped between a trailer and a semi. Its ruby cab entered, the pistol presented, the engine set to gun, the clutch at the mercy of a muscle, at the mercy of a mind, at the mercy of the trigger, at the mercy of a mind, at the mercy of the clutch. You useless waste, jibes the killer to the waste who cannot kill while caught in mercy's Celtic knot. It spun swastika. How swiftly It all seems to swing sideways, glance, hitcher, hawk, glut, yowl, death gods, ungodly, aching for it, while no one thinks this isn't inevitable, cuts her loose, jams another truck in front. There I go, from oblivion, led offing toward a road windmilling for rescue. No, I alligaried down this sunken navel to also cape for waste. Yes, me with my black life, gray Negro face, ever treed, and mercy between amens. I have a thickness to lean against death's heavy, urgent function like a terrific fiction. I will lie here and swing open heavens as the throttle opens, hapless as a silent gazebo. Revulsion and reverie equally mine to hold in this slim acreage. The tidal sun sidles across the briefly lit dog shit. The grace of mean geese unzipping the brown pond, fly-eyed cult of lotus pods, neighbor nosing under the bank, the shiver underneath my ruined shirt, the worm eating of things in the dirt, the dead and the living. Every slaughter such serenity ever cost is the life I have wasted. I'm about it. I can do this all day. I have two more for y'all before you get sick of me. I'm gonna skip this really happening. Had they seen what you and I have seen, the men who killed Jesus would have questioned its soundness, that it could delete the person Christ's contradictions, could allow someone to reinvent the dusty-ankled Son of God as Father and immaculate, could bring to a smarter disciple, at best a devoted mob, a constituency at worst. The rest of it they would have seen coming. I have come to this consortium of uncertainties. My mind, the coward, the noiseless jungle erupts, its growing roughness around, its plentitudes visibly elevating kettle drums my temples, and like you, I have thought the thought of him murdered, but failed to think out much further. The president, the Führer, the Tsar, the general, minister, the sir, is not Jesus. Nevertheless, the illusion is his father. We bassinet him in our disbelief. We think to table him. We turn him over like a table, and surprised, we find no tails. Come forth. Watch him while he smiles. Watch them all once he weeps. And this is my last poem. Leaves of Grass. I was banished or else I was trapped. I couldn't move without a passport and several fingers on my scalp, 4 contouring my hips, 2 of a stiff drink. When I was fired and required by the IRS to have my health insured, I fell ill. I assured my children they would live if they quit growing, kept moving, stayed out of the sun, stopped only in well-lit areas, rearranged their skeletal scaffolding. In the 4 year before it again came down to sycophant or psychopath, I overused the word haunt. I had choices: craft beer, French press Sumatra each morning, a Prime membership to discount my Whole Foods. I had a deconstructed soul food renaissance to look forward to, new neighbors sweating through candlelit hip-hop yoga. In order to cope with mourning the money I earned but never touched, I worked until I dreamt of work. I lived nowhere near non-toxic water. I walked and was accosted. I drove and was accosted. I gave up driving, but the ice caps had already begun to collapse. The infrastructure collapsed. The trains collided. The winds collided, and nothing remained anymore of our time to exhaust a reversal effort. Only those in the business of killing efficiently could travel. Everyone else was told to go back to a continent where the business of killing efficiently was booming. I was bombed and denied refuge. I was sent missionaries instead. I was given an immature God and told to be grateful. The faithful believed in bombs and not refugees. I slept in a bed and the children in cages. I slept in a bed and the children in cages. The children died in detention. I paid my bills and therefore I perpetrated. I paid taxes to be progressively, more effectively terrorized. Long-range acoustic devices for all the local precincts. I had a gun because they had a gun, because I had the manner of a thing on which a gun was found planted. The bodies of activists turned up shot in locked cuffs and burned in locked cars in the century after a century of lynchings. I was part of a citizenry ruled by corporations that were legally people who could tracelessly erase everything but plastic, which outlived us all, but not before it again became customary to swim home past flat fish and yard signs, mumbling resist above the headlights, to emerge lotioned in a thin film of oil, to be a homebody and always on homeland security camera, shiny and pornographic, while hunched fiendishly over the hot plate. I was not there, I told myself. You were not here, agreed the Bluetooth headset newsfeed. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Great, thank you. Just want to say thank you to everyone who is here tonight, to the Poetry Foundation for this incredible honor and for making this event and this fellowship possible, and of course to the 3/4 other incredible poets that I'm here tonight with. It's truly an honor of my life. Okay, this first poem is called Ode. Andrea taught me to ride side saddle. I rode in small and dizzying circles around her. I rode around her in small and dizzying circles, past the mirror and past the mirror, where, one summer, she was reared off by a stallion attacking his own flaring reflection. One summer she was reared off, or almost. I rode into the acres of our sunflowers. In the acres, the fields, I overindulged in beauty. In the fields I rode. Andrea leaned on a rail, her body a rail. Andrea leaned on the shadow of a rail. My shadow rode around her, the small bells of my intuition. She rang the small bells of the saddle. I was small and dizzying. I was dizzy. I rode in small and dizzying circles. Andrea taught me to ride, no stirrups, nothing suspending my body but intuition, the small and dizzying circles of my body. My intuition rode around me in small and dizzying circles, her shadow riding circles around me. I called her Andrea. It's really special to be here in Chicago. I was raised in Michigan and I live in Iowa now, so to have this communion of excellent poetry here in the Midwest, it means a lot to me. This next poem is called Failed Sestina, which if you've ever tried to write a sestina, I hope you find it relatable. Failed Sestina. With my ear to the door of my cell, and my want like a comb in my hair, like a veil where there is no veil, with a ring in my ear, a ring in the whole of my ear. I rap at the door of my will and the door of my want as to will them away, my want like a veil on the floor. I appear at the door of my will with a veil in my hand and a comb in my hair. My want like a hole that I bore in the floor, where my will is more feeling than veil, and my veil is more want for a veil than a veil. I wear the comb of my fear in my hair. My veil is as thin as my want, and my want is as thin as my hair. When I curl up my want in the curl of my hair, when I curl up on the floor of the cell of my want, I bear my fear in my cells like I'm bearing a ring, like I'm curled up inside of the ring in my ear. I rap at my want for a door where there is no door, a will where there is no will. At my want for unveiling, my will to unveil it, the curve of my will and my ear to the door, with the curl of my ear to the door, not the door, but my fear of the door. This is also a sestina. It's called Sestina with 6 titles. I tried. I tried to set my longing down. I tried. Behind the white chalk lines my longing drew. Neatly I backed away from longing, drew all of my swords at once, my hands on the back of my head of all my new longing. I met my longing in the heat. Tired and hot, I tried to shelter my longing's head, draw hasty circles in the sand with my swords as if to signal, stay away. I traveled with my longing, far away, folded and packed my longing alongside my shirts and swords, and as we walked, I tried recalling all of my longing circles from the circles inside my head. I sought to steal my longing's head, steal the language of longing away, watch the bloodied circles seep from the neck of my longing. Many times my longing tried to kill me with my own sword. I rode my longing like a horse, my sword like a lasso stirring above my head. I lassoed my longing, tried to break my longing away from its wildness, but longing ran the fence, circle after circle. I lost myself inside my longing circles, fell into my longing like a sword into the sea. My longing lost itself inside my head, and so I tried to find a way to set it down. I tried, dune after dune, the blousy heads of onions wishing my longing away. The horse tried. The mirage of the horse tried. This next poem is called The Worm. I have a worm beneath my hair, a future worm, a nerve from the eternal present, crawled out of a wedding urn. My worm has no utility, a boiled-looking, ruddy thing, a Puritan he'd made a home of incongruency, or Dickinson's, quote, he fathomed me. If I can fathom her, not as wet nurse, midwife, or mother, not self, not buzzed self, not self strung out on beauty, a decent metamorphosis, a ripe analogy for early youth. But worm, afraid and unafraid, as lassoed by my string. This poem is called Revision. It's in 3 sections. 1. The body, like a crowd, moves without a mind, moves without an ambit, tilts without an axis, pulls without a magnet. A school of fish could tell you that. The wind is more a rudder than a mast. 2. The body, like a mind, moves in crowds. A worm or wave or kiln could tell you that. The worm, a solitary iteration of the fish. The wave, a solitary iteration of the wind. The kiln is thinking itself warm. 3. The body moves with a crowded mind. A worm or wave could tell you that. The worm with the mind of a fish, the kiln with the mind of a wave, the wave with the mind of a kiln, thinking itself warm. This poem is called Cove octave. 1. Even at its most light-peaked, the crab fat in the basalt sand is still eaten, and the eating is still swept from the sewing table with the ripper, the zippers, with the ragged seams. 2. The crag, more of a circle than a wall, the nesting grounds, a print of scat in the shale, in the mixture, a plover, more image than bird, not an incline from within the midst. 3. My broken off engagement to the fragment, and half a liver-dotted egg. 4. A single debris, a yellow mop, severed from the stick, wedged into a reach within an inset crevice, so close in form and function to something dogged from the sea. 5. Snake-shaped relief in the hard palate, in the silt, in the stove-black sand, like a heap of rope dropped suddenly from a hatch, like flesh turned into skin and balled, reborn, and here is where it bled. 6. And here is where it slivered back into the tall asparagus. 7. On the overpass, above the hollow, shy of disappointment, old photos piped to a display, grim at the edges. A row of women posing on a dune in cone-shaped satin bikinis. 8. On excess. I hawked it all. I could have supped on it. I think I'll just read one more. This poem is called The Rest. Thanks again for being here tonight. Still I keep myself, I take to bed. One lung is red, cut red flowers hung in pink water. My other lung is out of line. From one lung, I tell the truth. From the other lung, I lie. Cut pink flowers hung in red water. Like a pain, the truth is mine. The lie is that today I want to die. Cut red water hung in pink flowers. The rest of it is stillness, rest, a hard cough into a soft pan, a soft cough into a hard plain. Cut pink water hung in red flowers. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. My name is Franny. It is such a wild honor to be here and to be sharing the stage with this incredible cohort of heroes that have been, am, currently, will continue to be huge fans of. Thank you so much to the Poetry Foundation, to Chicago Public Library, to everyone at the Poetry Foundation, and to you all for being here, and everyone else. Thank you, Harriet, for everyone else who made this possible. It's such a thrill. It's wild. It's like crazy, right? Like it's really cool. I'm gonna read one long thing, and then if it goes quicker than I think that it'll go, then I'll read one thing at the end. And if it's as slow as I think it'll go, then that'll be it. It'll be over. Okay. Thank you all for spending this evening with us. What an honor. Okay. The thing is in sections. It's sort of a prosy thing. It's in sections, and so I'll just like snap in between the sections to show you to indicate the breaks. And there are a few lines from the poet Banu Kapil in here, and there might be others that I'm not forgetting. I'm not remembering right now, but it's called How to Let Go of the World. There's a documentary about climate change called How to Let Go of the World, and Sam asks, should I jump off a building? Among a growing list of promises I can't make my friends, this weight will tether. You can come back up again. The faithfulness of gravity, of morning sounds, if only you'll stay. When I walk into the street, it's almost as if it'll last. Smudge of a cooked orange pressed into the sky. The cars follow all their old lineages back and forth from shifts. Meanwhile, 3 teenagers pile, rollicking onto the sidewalk. I don't know how to do it, how to hold their faces in my hands and tell them what's waiting, how to teach any of us to follow this song into what dark. One evening, I turned a corner and panicked at the sudden flash in my rear view, teeth chattering into my highest throat. Every nerve prepared for the acrid drip of cop talk until I realized it was no cruiser. It was the sky shocked with dying. I cried when I saw the photos of bleached reefs. Later, I had to cut the phrase out of every poem. Bleached reef, bleached reef. If a record skips, you bend low to greet it. You greet it with a cloth and your own good breath. When the Pyrex burst all over the stove, we stood still for a minute to let ourselves be rocked by the sound, by the sudden natural disaster of our ruined dinner. To be safe, we turned to the ceiling and asked any spirits present to tuck themselves back into the drywall, then went for bags and brooms, picked out the shards, the ghost knives hiding in the tiles for our heels. I should mention that when my first love left Earth, he left from a rooftop, though he didn't jump, or he jumped only the way mussels do on their way to sleep. I can watch the videos of brimstone eating California. I can listen to the sound of a boy describe how holding a line against fire might cut time off his sentence. I can hold his voice in my hands and whisper straight into it, but that doesn't make him hear. I can love and love his arms helping mine make something other than dirt and watch that love bleed straight into the space between us, and then, of course, it falls into a tunnel and gone. You can come back up again. Run, and the sky will catch you in its 1,000 orange hands. You'll never land. I stalk the house, swatting the flies, thirsty for the sound of newspaper on exoskeleton, the satisfaction of a clean and bloody ending. When they're gone, I almost miss them. They fly out of my arms. I fly out of their arms. What's the German word for preemptively missing something so much you can't look at it? Literal translation, green, 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 and I hide my face. In Flint, I turn on the tap and out comes war wrapped in putrid cellophane. In Detroit, I flip the switch and boil war for tea. In Providence, I overwar the plants. War runs down my face in the theater's dark. I wade into a blanket of war and let its waves carry me out past the shoreline's certainty. In other words, I beach myself. Other words, I leach bleakly, breathe sleet, a wreath of it. I flinch at the leaves, anticipating their reek, the graves of reefs. I bleach and watch the chlorine slip clean from my teeth. I want to tether my friends to the rooftop railing, the way we once pinned a blanket to the beach with shoes, books, bags of carrots, wine in a can, how we flexed and curled our toes until we found the damper sand, the soft homes of crabs below. But the wind won't stop coming, orange and exoskeleton against our little shore. If only it had been a ghost that had shattered the glass, some simple anger, some old world fable we could soothe back to sleep with a few choice words and a handful of incense. Much worse that it was the heat, much worse the way molecules bend to the fact of it and break. I listened to those firefighters while, in Hamtramck, I waged a much tinier war against the dust on my blinds. I wiped and wiped to rid my windows of it. In the forest, rot feeds. The earth drinks soot and makes it into new leaves. In other words, it's the plastic here that makes dirt a problem. I bent low to greet it, dipped a cloth in water to approximate a tongue. Meanwhile, the light through the slats shocked my image into slices. When disaster comes, some of us will stand on the rooftops to address the ghosts. Some of us will hold the line. Some of us will look for the shards, run our tongues along the floor. I say when, like disaster hasn't come, isn't already growing in the yard. Do I have to run through the list? The firefighter prisoners, my friend's island slowly swallowed, war in my faucet, remember? Syria is the name of a drought. The name of this hurricane is Exxon. Exxon, I shout. I can pull as many weeds as I want. I stock the garden, pulling them, thirsty for the sound of their true names wrenching out of the soil. Do I have to say it? They fly out of my arms. I should mention that when my first love died, I already had a stack of poems about missing him. I want to say this prepped me for widowhood to the world, etc. The truth, under the topmost sand is another darker layer, damp from the ocean's closeness. There were days I begged to be buried in it, cool, mutable grave, reprieve from the unrelenting sun. Among a growing list of other things that are unrelenting, teenagers piling rollicking into the street, the shock of a citrus sky in midwinter, the way a phrase's shape can hook itself through your lip for weeks. Once, Sam walked around for a whole day muttering, "Soul, I say," and he did and did. That's a Martina Spada line. I forgot to cite that one. In lieu of a proper translation for my grief, I say green, green, green until it cools itself enough to lower myself into. Holding my love's face in my hands, I tell him I miss him. I say, I miss you like I miss the trees. By this I mean, look, the trees are here. Everyone's outside, darling. Green in my hand, ghosts in the drywall. Everyone's waiting for us. I should mention that when my first love died, he was already dead, had already always been on his way to the roof, on his way over its edge. And when he was here, he was here. By this logic, he is and was and is and was unrelentingly. In lieu of proximity to firefighters, in lieu of the ability to speak the airless language of ghosts, or to reverse the logic of molecules, or to force Exxon to call the hurricane by its rightful name, or to convince my friends not to launch themselves from the rooftops of every false promise made by every rotten idol, in lieu of all I can't do or undo, I hold the faces of the trees in my hands. I miss them and miss them until I fly out of grief's arms and the sky catches me in its 1,000 orange hands. It catches me and I stay there, suspended against the unrelenting orange. I stay there, splayed and dying and shocking the siren sky. Let's see what time. Maybe I'll just read one final thing. Thank you all. This one's a little shorter. Thank you all so much for spending your evening with poems and with us. Similar theme. This one is called "The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On." Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of boats. Boats of prisoners, boats cracking under sky iron, boats making corpses bloom like algae on the shore. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of the bombed mosque. There was the apocalypse of the taxi driver warped by flame. There was the apocalypse of the leaving and the having left, of my mother unsticking herself from her mother's grave as the plane barreled down the runway. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of planes. There was the apocalypse of pipelines legislating their way through sacred water, and the apocalypse of the dogs, before which was the apocalypse of the dogs and the hoses, before which the apocalypse of dogs and slave catchers whose faces glowed by lantern light. Before the apocalypse of bees, the apocalypse of buses, border fence apocalypse, coat hanger apocalypse, apocalypse in the textbook's selective silences, There was the apocalypse of the settlement and the soda machine, the apocalypse of the settlement and the jars of scalps. There was the bedlam of the cannery. That's another Martina Spada. There was the bedlam of the cannery, the radioactive rain, the chairless martyr demanding a name. I was born from an apocalypse and have come to tell you what I know, which is that the apocalypse began when Columbus praised God and lowered his anchor. It began when a continent was drawn into cutlets. It began when Kublai Khan told Marco, begin at the beginning. By the time the apocalypse began, the world had already ended. It ended every day for a century or two. It ended, and another ending world spun in its place. It ended, and we woke up and ordered Greek coffees, drew the hot liquid through our teeth, as everywhere the apocalypse rumbled. The apocalypse remembered, our dear, beloved apocalypse. It drifted slowly from the trees all around us, so loud we finally stopped hearing it. Thank you all so much.
Let's have a round for all of our poets in the air. I hope you'll follow their work and be on the lookout for that upcoming edition of Poetry Magazine, which will include a special fellowship portfolio. Justin Philip Reed and Franny Choi will be signing books in the lobby momentarily. Thank you to Lizzie Rangel for ASL interpretation, and thank you all for being here. Happy Poetry Day, everyone.